Today is May 29th, and we just ended a fantastic, fun conversation with Jack Curry, all about the Yankees past, Yankees future, Yankees in between. Let's do it. Let's talk Yanks.
Recaps galore and weekly awards, stat lines, steaming hot takes. Your Yankees news with these two fine dudes. It's time for Talkin' Yanks. Talking Yanks with old JOMBOY and Jake. Talking Yanks with old JOMBOy and Jake.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Talkin' Yanks. My name is Jimmy. I have Jake with me, producer BBD's here, and we literally just finished a nice conversation with good friend Jack Curry from the Yes Network, who was our first ever guest. He's been on the show, I think, 3 or 4 times now, and it's always fun to catch up with him, especially considering this was weird times, and we weren't talking about the present. We were just talking about, past Yankees and some old fun stories. I thought it was an awesome conversation, Jake, right?
There's not much better than getting lost in Yankee wormholes with Jack Curry. That's any player or name that listed. We dove in, starting with the big guy, Derek Jeter, and all the way down to names like Ramiro Mendoza. So Jack's awesome. And, this is, our 4th time with Jack Curry? Something like that, 4th or 5th.
Something like that. He's been very, very kind to us, and we appreciate that.
Not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but I think it's like, I don't want to say perfect podcasting, but man, it's loose, it's fun, but there's still so much good stories and information that now I sound like our own hype man, so I'll stop. But it's Jack's great.
And this interview with Jack is brought to you by our good friends at CoverageGear.com. They got whatever gear you want, they got you covered. They got a ton of Yankee stuff. You see me wearing the hat all the time, the baseball one. They got all rise hats. They got subtle Yankee hats with just the number on there, like 11 for Gardner with his name in the back. They're fully licensed by MLBPA. They got Cole, dad hats, snapbacks, stickers. They even have neck gaiters, which are basically masks. I have those. Much better than the masks that go behind your ear, just kind of like a sleeve. Oh, it looks like they even have a Make the Yankees Great Again trucker cap. So some people might like that. Some people might not like that at all, but they got it. They got Yankee Stadium hats. Go to CoverageGear.com. Check out the Yankee collection. Use discount code JOMBOY. You get 20% off. CoverageGear.com.
Coverage Gear.
And here is Jack Curry.
Go back to back. Belly to belly.
We are joined by recurring guest and attendee of Bruce Springsteen's The River Tour in 1980, Jack Curry. Jack, how are you doing?
Jake, I'm doing great. I'm glad that you were stalking my Twitter account because somebody asked that question yesterday on Twitter. What was the first concert you ever attended? And little 15-year-old Jack Curry sent a self-addressed stamped envelope to Madison Square Garden. Not only did I get Bruce Springsteen tickets back in the mail, I got 4th row orchestra seats. And that was the first concert I attended. As silly, as foolish as I might have been as a 15-year-old, I knew when I was standing there, it's probably going to be one of the better shows you ever see, kid. So enjoy it as much as you can.
Yeah, that's a hell of a bar to set. Has it been topped? Do you have a better concert experience, or is that still number 1?
JOMBOY, I'm a Clash fan. Springsteen puts on a show for the ages. I've probably seen him 15 times, so he's going to play for 4 hours. But my brother and I went to see the Clash in 1981 at a place called Bonds. That's actually still on 45th Street in Times Square. It's kind of a restaurant now. And toward the end of the show, we climbed on stage. Now the band was gone. They had fled. But to be able to say that as a 17-year-old, I was on the same stage that Joe Strummer and Mick Jones were on, that's probably my favorite concert ever.
Did you grab a memento? Do you have like a pick or a drumstick or anything?
No, I was not quick enough before we got shuffled off the stage. I was eyeing up drum area because you're right. You think there might be some sort of music equipment lying around. No, I did not. I did not succeed in being a thief, John Boy.
What about baseball games? Did you ever because we've been doing.
Say this.
Yeah, something we've been doing is watching baseball games, old games. Like we started with 1972, and we watched bits and pieces of every World Series all the way to 2019. And something we couldn't believe was like, I knew they rushed the field after games, but from this our mindset, we're like, this is awful. The players can't celebrate. They have to rush into the clubhouse. They're scared.
Reggie Jackson, he had to go grab a batting helmet because he was nervous, and you see all the legs sitting over the right field wall, and it's absurd. So we need to know if you were involved in anything.
Yeah, were you a field rusher back in the day? Did you ever get the chance to do that?
It's kind of interesting, guys. So in the music world, where I was not eyeing up being a professional, I didn't mind being a rebel. But in the baseball sports world, I wanted to have some decorum. So the answer is no. I don't know that I ever had seats close enough to think about running onto a baseball field, but I share your horror, I guess is the right way to say it, because when you look at some of those guys, I remember Chris Chambliss after his home run, I think he just body blocks a guy to get back to the dugout. So I was probably never close enough to do that. And I'm not sure, honestly, that I really would have ever done something like that, because I would have thought that if I did that when I was 16 and then I try and go cover a game there when I'm 25, they still would have had my picture on a wall somewhere and they wouldn't have allowed me in, and then I would have been in trouble. It's
crazy. My dad was at the Chambliss game, but he was way up, so he couldn't rush. He was at the Chambliss game and the Boone game, so he's been like his percentage of games he's been to that have been amazing. It's so unfair. But yeah.
Did he save anything from either game? Is he a memorabilia guy, ticket stub even, program?
No, he didn't. But I mean, at the Boone game, he saw a guy next to him rip the seat off, and take the seat home underneath his jacket, which is like insane that people think that way. Like it's just a piece of garbage at that point, or scooping the dirt. I don't know. But yeah, those scenes were insane back then. And we were trying to map when did they stop this. And it was basically the 86 with the Mets kind of around that time period.
Yeah, you would never even think about doing that now with the amount of security and horses, cops on mounted horse top and all that. But yeah, there was a time in our history where that occurred. Quick story on seats. I don't know if you guys saw Mike Ficcaro's article in the Post about Yankee Stadium seats. Did you guys see this article? Great column.
I did not.
He wanted to get a couple of Yankee Stadium seats as a kid. His dad signed off. His mother swooped in and said no. And he wrote this heartfelt column about not being able to get those seats. But it reminded me of, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Roosevelt Stadium in Jersey City. I played some baseball games there in high school. That is a famous stadium, so much so that Jackie Robinson played his first professional game there. He was a minor leaguer. So it has a lot of history, a lot of bands, Grateful Dead, a lot of bands played there. So they were knocking that stadium down when I was in college. I convinced a couple of my buddies to drive from the Bronx to Jersey City. We crammed 4 Roosevelt Stadium seats into my Gran Torino, gave the guys who were working construction $5 for the 4 seats, put them in our dorm, thought in the common area, thought we were the coolest, or I thought we were the coolest guys on campus. About a week later, physical plant came in, removed the seats. So I owned those seats for about 5 days. And then my great treasured memento from Roosevelt Stadium was in the trash at Fordham somewhere.
That is pretty cool, though. I like when people have seats. We went to Phil Hughes' house in California, and he had some old Yankee Stadium seats in his setup. And it's so weird to see them out of their element. And then there is a cool feeling to them. When,
they look tiny, right? I mean, it looks like, where did you fit in that seat?
Yeah. And you realize how many people are just stacked. It's crazy. We talk about mounted horseback, and I want to talk about a lot of the guests you've had, but you had Wade Boggs on to talk about that. And what struck me is, Jake, he said he doesn't remember how he got on the horse, and he's not looking to find out. No. he was up there, and that was it.
It's funny you say that. So my wife's a pretty avid baseball fan. There's a lot of things you could ask Wade Boggs. I mean, the guy had 3,000 hits. He won 5 batting titles. He's got a World Series title with the Yankees in '96. Just a clinical hitter. So I told her I had interviewed Boggs that day. The first thing she said was, "Why did he jump on that horse? Did you ask him about the horse?" So it's interesting that his career in a lot of people's minds has come down to that moment. I thought that was a terrific answer, JOMBOY, that he has that moment in his head somewhere, and he doesn't want to trade it in for anything at all. I remember talking to him after that game. I think the story has changed a little bit because I'm pretty sure after the game he said it was the second time he'd ever been on a horse. I think now he's saying it's the first time. Well, the point is he was not an expert in equestrian ability, but he found a way to get on the horse after that game.
That's a good change to the story by him. I like the pivot to first time. It's a better telling there.
It is.
I found the 1996 parade footage on the internet, and I was watching it, and the mounted police of New York made him an official Mountie, like gave him a helmet and stuff during the parade. And I think there's something to be said. Someone needs to make like a coffee table book about the weird things that happen at parades, because a lot of it is like playing into an inside joke or a theme that the team just went through that out of context 20 years later is like, why did they do that? That doesn't make any sense. I bet there's so many little nuggets like Wade Boggs becoming an honorary mounted police officer.
Well,
That's weird.
I covered that parade. I was on one of the floats. They had a media float. I'll tell you a story about that in a second. I did not remember the Boggs honorary Mountie story, so thank you for sharing that with me. It was the first and only parade I've ever covered, guys, and you want to know why? Once the fans along the way realized that we were the media float, rolls of toilet paper with rocks in them, they were firing stuff at us. It became a very unpleasant experience. Not fun at all. So from thereafter, I covered parades from the safety of the media area and just waited for everybody to come back and when the parade was done.
I want everyone listening to know that if the Yankees have a parade coming up in the future and we somehow sneak on a media float or whatever it is, feel free to aim the rocks at me because I won't care on that day. Do not aim them at Mr. Curry or anyone else. Throw the rocks at me. I'm ready for that.
I have a feeling you guys would do okay on the float. I have a feeling that you've got enough fans out there who appreciate what you do and like you guys that you might not get the venom that for some reason was directed at us that day.
What is it like to see the parade from that vantage point and, just see the seas of people? And I remember hearing some players talk about the first parade in New York and then 96 and saying like you would look down, it had to be a Yankee eye, you look down the cross streets and it was just like nonstop. Is that what it was? Was it amazing?
I remember a few things about it, JOMBOY. First of all, just getting to the site at City Hall where you needed to get on one to sort of figure out where you were going to go and everything was tricky. And so there was panic that you weren't going to get to the right spot. Then once you were on the float, I have to admit it was very surreal. And I'd like to think I'm this jaded New York journalist and I've covered everything. I've seen everything. When you're part of that, that's pretty cool. None of that adulation is for you, but you're covering it and you're getting to see what these players are experiencing. So I remember having a notebook in my hand and I'm just trying to write down everything that I could see. But I did also try and remember to soak some of this in because this is pretty cool. And part of it was fun and the streamers flying into your float. But again, once they determined that we were the enemy, it became less fun. Everybody just kind of got away from the sides of the float and got to the center of the float. And I was on a float. I posted a picture of it not too long ago. Heyman, Sherman, Dave Lennon, Susan Waldman. There were a bunch of people on there whose names you guys would recognize. So we had fun with it.
Do you think there was one reporter there that was really, really, angry and you were like, oh, they're throwing them at you, John, not me?
Well, maybe. I'm probably not going to answer that one.
He's right here.
There were probably more. Well, I shouldn't say that. Yes, maybe there were. Maybe their ire was directed at someone or some person individually. I can't say. Or maybe just once it said media. But like Jake said earlier, just won a World Series, man. It was almost 20 years since the Yankees had won a World Series. We had chronicled that run for you. How could you be turning your attention against us at that point?
Some people just would rather be angry than happy, and I think that is the biggest proof right there. If you go to a parade, celebrating the team winning and you find some reason to be angry, you should probably find a therapist after that too.
Why did you write that article about Jeter going 0 for 4 that day, Jack? What were you thinking? Let's spin it back to Wade Boggs a little bit, because he's a fascinating guy who's kind of left baseball a little bit. I mean, there's the It's Always Sunny episode where they talk about Wade Boggs, and there's some folklore stories that we don't need to.
You mean his legend has gone past the baseball audience into mainstream audience?
There's some folklores that if you want to look them up, we don't need to deep dive into. But I know there was kind of a special level of baseball player that when my dad was teaching me the game, he would just there's 3 guys that jump out that he said one sentence about him, and he said, "That man can hit." And it was Wade Boggs, it was Don Mattingly, and it was Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn, he said, fat man could hit. But those were the 3 guys. And I know I've always been a baseball reference nerd, and I know Jimmy's starting to get deeper and deeper sunk into it. And Wade Boggs is one of those guys. He's got, 5 out of 6 years he won a batting title. And, I mean, some of the numbers are... would blow some people's head off. When you're talking about to him and about him, I mean, what does your head see, like the legendary guy on the field, off the field, a little mix of both, or what?
A little mix of both, and I'm glad you asked that, because I have a couple of things to say about Boggs. Covering him, I thoroughly enjoyed it, because what we do for a living, we need someone who's going to share. A 5-word answer doesn't help me. I want to know your hitting technique. I want to know the science of hitting. I want to know where this swing, this stance came from. And Boggs loved to talk hitting, so I love that about him. In preparation for this interview and for all these interviews, and I'm not trying to get up on a soapbox here, but here's a little lesson for young journalists. I know all of these recent Yankees that I have interviewed, and I could sit down right now and talk to them without doing a stitch of research. But for every one of these interviews I've done, I've moved back to the 90s. I've gone back to my New York Times articles. I've reminded myself of what happened in 96 and tried to pick their brains about things that happened in the season that maybe they didn't even remember. So one of the things I did with Boggs was just ask him, what statistical nugget about your career stands out for you? For me, it was a period where for a 162-game period across 2 seasons, he hit 401. Wasn't a calendar year, but in a 162-game span, the dude hit 401 with a 476 on-base percentage. He said that one. He goes, of course, that one. But then the one that he kind of loved even more, and you just referenced it, there was a 4-year period where he had at least 200 hits and at least 100 walks. And he said, that is so hard to do, and I'm proud of having done that. And then the last thing I wanted to say was, when I was a beat writer, there was so much stuff that you had to cover every day. One of the ways that I tried to stand out was, what can you find out about this guy off the field? And one day I found nirvana in terms of baseball hitting. So I saw this guy watching Yankee spring training, and it had to be Wade Boggs' father. And without even, I just walked up to him and I said, are you Wade's dad? The guy talked to me at length about Wade Boggs and hitting. And he said that Boggs had the same stance, approach, and swing since he was in Little League. And I went up to Wade and asked him about that. He goes, oh, yeah, my dad taught me a way to hit. Made him hit left-handed, by the way. Then taught him a way to hit, and that's the way that he continued to hit for his entire career.
He made him, so that's Posada's dad made him hit left-handed as well until he was 14. That blows my mind that, let's talk about putting your son on a path. And it's a scary one if it doesn't.
Jorge says he was 0 for his first 20, hits a home run, and as he's rounding the bases, he's kind of like waving to his dad saying, I did it, I finally did it. And
crazy.
Jorge's dad, he was a baseball scout, interviewed him a handful of times. He told me this fascinating story about wanting to teach Jorge about work ethic. It was a beautiful sunny day in the summer, and Jorge wanted to go do whatever kids do at that point, baseball, swimming, riding his bike. His father gave him a bucket of paint, can of paint, and said that fence has been chipped and has needed paint for a long time. You need to go sand it and paint the fence. And he was ticked off, but he said his father just wanted to teach him about a job needs to be done. This is the job you need to do today. So again, the family connection. I used to always try and get to talk to players' families, because you're going to find out so much about them that their teammates don't even know.
Yeah, because a lot of these guys, they're young when they come into the league. I thought you were going to go with a Karate Kid thing with the painting of the fence. It was like, that's how he became a switch hitter or something. But
it was similar. Jorge's dad is a treat. The guy knows a ton about baseball. He's got his own story about leaving Cuba, defecting from Cuba on a boat with one credit card and a bottle of water and making it here. Pretty amazing story.
It's crazy. So as you've been doing this, you've been churning out content. I was joking with Jake that, you guys are living mine and Jake's life for the last 2 years now, sitting at your home in the office, making content over the internet. Are you enjoying that process?
I actually am, to be honest with you. We'd all like to see games, but I think there's value in relationships. I think there's value in storytelling. I think there's value in the ability to be able to get somebody who maybe you haven't spoken to in 10 years, but they're willing to do an interview with you because you covered them many, many years ago. I covered Mike Gallego for 3 years with the Yankees. I don't know if I've spoken to him in 10 or 15 years. And when we reached out to him, boom, he got back to us. And then he profusely thanked me before and after the interview for not forgetting him and for remembering him and kind of including him as part of that Yankee run. Obviously, he wasn't there in 96. He left after the 94 season. But this is all leading up to something. It's been great to put all this online and on YouTube. But we're actually producing a Yankee Dynasty show, 96 to 2000, that will air in June. I think the date right now is June 18th. Don't hold me to it. We'll probably put a ton of social media promo stuff out there when it finally comes around. But I think we've gotten about 20 ex-Yankees already who will contribute to that show, including all but one member of the core four who we're supposed to nail down next week, a guy with the initials DJ, Ernie Williams, David Cohn. Well, David Cohn and Paul O'Neill work for us. They better have done it. Girardi, Tim Raines, Cecil Fielder, Charlie Hayes, right up and down the list. It's been fun. It's been really enjoyable for me to be able to reminisce and go back and talk to those guys.
Is there anything from doing all these interviews with these guys and kind of reliving those years that you said, oh, I didn't know that was going on behind the scenes? Is there anything that's been surprised or piqued your interest in that way?
There's been a lot of stuff, JOMBOY. And interestingly enough, do you know who has provided some content that shouldn't surprise you? Because I think you guys maybe have interviewed him. Even though Buck Showalter was gone after the 95 season, when Buck Showalter talks about what that dynasty became and he wasn't part of it, to hear him talk about it, I mean, this guy had a lot of those players. This guy knew what the dynamic of that clubhouse was in 95, and they made a lot of changes. We all know that. Martinez comes in, Cohen's now there for a full season. Jeter is the full-time shortstop, but the pride that they took in winning. Now everybody goes out there and everybody wants to win, but there became a ferociousness and a fierceness about that team. And it started in 96. Obviously they lose in 97, but then in 98 it really hits home where that team just felt as if it should win every day. So that was a part of it. And then Mariano Rivera used a great word. He used the word brotherhood, which I thought was a great way to describe some of those players who were there for all four, and just the experience that they had. I could give you specific stories. I've heard specific stories from guys, things that I didn't necessarily know. Jorge Posada told me hilarious stories about how he used to intentionally try to agitate El Duque because El Duque pitched better when he was mad. So during warm-ups, Posada would short hop a throw to the mound, or he would throw a pitch at his shins, or before the game in the clubhouse, he would ignore him, or he'd be late for the meeting. And he said that was my way of getting him fired up before games. And I loved getting inside content like that.
And allegedly they got into a fist fight before a game in the clubhouse once, so he must have gone a little too far one time. But yeah, that relationship, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for the Posada El Duque relationship, and that kind of paints it in a more fun picture than them just butting heads. As Posada was doing gamesmanship with him, getting him into the right mindset. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for this thing. So was the Dynasty thing in the works a while ago, or is this kind of quarantine?
I think it's quarantine. I think it might have been something we would have done anyway. It's the 20-year anniversary of the Subway Series. We probably would have tried to do this anyway, but this has given us all the opportunity to come up with clever ideas, much like you guys are doing. I think it started out, Posada was the first guy I got. Then I got Mariano. And then I'm working with a couple of great producers, Jared Boschnack and Emily Coulter. And I think once we started to line up these people, well, what can we do with these beyond putting some online and then playing a snippet on these shows we do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday called Yes, We're Here? Where can we give these interviews an even bigger splash? And it's going to be a 90-minute show. So people who are pining for baseball or pining for the days of those Yankee championships, I think they'll absolutely love it.
Yeah,
you guys,
that is awesome.
How much have you stolen from the MJ documentary? I mean, was that more so, hey, you know, I kind of like this flashback thing, or is it more so you tell the producers, hey, 6 million people watch that, so we should do this because this is another Dynasty? Or what was the biggest help of the MJ doc going with this one?
It's funny you asked that, because I think everybody knew that the Last Dance was coming. And I'm not trying to say that we stole anything or we stole an idea, but I do think that even without quarantining this year, we would have been remembering those teams, like I said, because of the 20-year anniversary. The thing that's different about Last Dance, and you guys obviously know this, I'm not breaking any news here, is I just told you a story about El Duque and Jorge, and JOMBOY brought up the potential of fisticuffs. We don't have footage of that. With Jordan, you had the footage. You had him getting on guys. You had him riding his teammates mercilessly and being a bully. I mean, he was a bully, and he admits it. So that's the one thing. I want people to watch our show. Trust me, and our interviews, I think, will cause them to want to watch it. But the thing that made Last Dance stand out is we saw footage that we had never seen before. We've seen the shot over Craig Elo. We've all seen that. But when you see him at practice getting in a guy's grill that you had not seen before, that's pretty eye-opening stuff.
A lot of people wanted to make the comparison Jeter and MJ. Some people were tweeting it about it. You know, they were winning is the only thing that matters. Tireless work and long careers. Jeter had a 20-year career. Jeter's also charismatic. Like, he could drop a joke and be a little sassy in his interview, especially when Kim Jones and him really got like a rapport. She really brought out like a humorous side of Jeter, I thought, in his post-game interviews. But do you see any similarities? Do you think Jeter led in that way? Was he tough on his teammates, or was it just lead by example and try to keep up?
I'll give you my answer in a second, but I'm going to tell you that I interviewed Mattingly a couple of weeks ago. Mattingly obviously saw a little of Jeter in '95. Then as a coach, obviously saw him again. Now works for him with the Marlins. Mattingly is a big Jordan fan, and Mattingly in his own way was Jordan-esque in New York for a while. He talked about how he understood in the Last Dance where Jordan was, I'm just staying in my hotel room because I can't go out. Mattingly said that Jeter reminded him of Jordan, that he saw a lot of similarities. And I think, JOMBOY, that you just hit on some of those similarities. I think the single-mindedness, I think the focus, I think the get the heck out of my way, we're winning this game. I think where there was a difference is that Jeter's leadership style, from what I observed and have heard from teammates, was more lead by example. I'm not going to say that in his 20-year career, Jeter never got in a player's face, because he did. He got in David Wells' face once after Wells kind of threw his hands up in the air when a ball fell between a few fielders. From that footage, it seemed like this was not only a daily occurrence with Jordan. This was multiple times a day. I'm going to ride you. I'm going to make you feel like you're worthless, because when the crunch time comes, I need you to be tough. I don't think Jeter did that. I don't think that was in Jeter's DNA to do what we saw Jordan do over and over again.
That Jordan-Bernie dynamic would have been a really interesting one. Those different ends of the spectrum there, to say the least.
You know, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a very interesting call by you. Bernie did not react well when a thug like Mel Hall was trying to get him to be a certain way. But Mel Hall was doing it more out of viciousness. I think that if Michael Jordan, let's say Michael Jordan in basketball was Michael Jordan in baseball, and if he said to Bernie, man, you got to get a bigger secondary lead, man. We don't need you to be cement shoes over there at first base. You ran track in Puerto Rico. You're the fastest guy in the team. Get a bigger secondary lead. I think Bernie would have reacted well to that. It was the Bernie, you're wearing funny glasses and you look like you should be in a librarian jabs from Mel Hall that Bernie didn't appreciate. And nobody should. Why should anybody appreciate that?
Yeah, it's also just such a different dynamic with basketball. Like, Jordan, their practices were games and they played against each other. It's not like baseball. You just, maybe in spring training you do live BP, but even that's a little different. But that leads it to just, you can't do it. But also Jeter never seemed like, from all the stories you hear, is more guys would come over, think he was overrated, not get it, and then just see his day-to-day and his schedule. And you hear so many players say like, hey, once I played with him, I really appreciated what he does day in and day out.
I used to always tell people that when he and A-Rod were side by side, and if you look at A-Rod statistically, his numbers dwarf Jeter's numbers. I mean, a shortstop that puts up those power numbers. I thought A-Rod was the more talented player, but I thought Jeter was the better baseball player. And I think anybody who watches baseball and understands baseball knows exactly what I'm saying, that Jeter just had a knack for knowing what the right thing was to do instinctually and making the right play and being in the right place, flip play, i.e. But about what you said about Jordan, too, is I just think there's more of a way in basketball to lead where you get in somebody's face. Point with 15 seconds left, he was getting the ball. How many times were the Yankees trailing by 1 run in the 9th inning and Jeter's not even getting an at-bat? I just think there's a different way in basketball. When you're touching the ball on every possession, you're going to have to sort of drag guys along with you. I don't know if that exists in baseball because of what I just said.
Baseball is its own biggest bully in a way too. Like, the game is going to beat you up. You're going to go 0 for 20. You're going to go 0 for 4 in a day. And if you had another guy just rubbing that in every time it happened, you'd snap. Yeah. You'd snap like crazy.
It's a great point.
So it's crazy.
For all our analytical listeners that just heard Jeter's a better baseball player than A-Rod that are coming back from their heart attack, it's okay. You're going to be okay. And
I would argue that, by the way. I would argue that, and I would have a lot of evidence to support the point I was trying to make. But I know what you're saying as well.
And Jack,
no, I think day in, day out, Jeter did more to help his team win than A-Rod did, because it's so many intangibles and so much like, hey, if Jeter's locked in for every single at bat, I better be locked in for every single at bat. And if Jeter's backing up the throw every single time, I better do it, and stuff like that really changes the whole team.
It matters. I agree.
Yeah. And Jack, no, I was saying that makes our soul sing. I was kind of mocking the rest of them. And Jack Curry acting as the Michael Jordan of baseball, talking to Bernie Williams, also made my soul sing. But we'll bring it back to some of the yes stuff. And one of your more recent ones that came out today, and you mentioned Buck Showalter, who he does. We love Buck. We haven't got him yet. We will. He'll come. But we talked to Delman Young on our Talkin' Baseball, and he's kind of an interesting baseball character himself. But he had the nicest things to say about Buck Showalter and was like, that dude looks at the game differently. And that kind of confirmed everything we see on the Yes Network. But when you're lining up Buck Showalter and Deion Sanders, I mean, do you just light up inside journalistically? Like getting these two people that are somewhat from distant worlds. I mean, Deion obviously played in Major League Baseball, but a lot of people know Deion Sanders for other stuff. But I mean, what's your mindset going into that? Are you just trying to spark the fire and let them go off, or what's your mentality there?
I was very excited, no doubt about it, because of what you just said. I thought that this had the chance to be a lot of fun and produce a lot of interesting stories, because I've heard Buck talk about Deion so much. And I'm dating myself here, but I actually covered Deion a little bit as a baseball player in 1990. So I got a feel for what Deion was about then. I really thought, guys, for that interview, I needed to be a bystander for the most part, but moderate and inject some topics when I needed to. And I think for the first 5 or 6 minutes of that interview, I might have spoken twice. And that to me, there is skill in being an interviewer who is quiet, especially when you have two people there. There was no need for me to say anything. These two guys who knew each other so well for 30 years were reminiscing, so let them reminisce. But then I also, every interview I do, I might have the Buck, Showalter, Dion paper. Well, you don't need to see it, but I mean, I've got topics and I'm ready to hit all those topics. We absolutely wanted to talk about the Bo Jackson game where he hit 3 home runs. Dion comes up, hits a line drive to center field. Bo stretches out, doesn't catch it. Dion hits an inside the park homer. Bo separates his shoulder, has to leave the game, doesn't get a chance for a 4th home run. So we wanted to go there. And I just tried to lay back and watch when I needed to inject. And then I injected when I felt, okay, they might need a little help here. Let's throw this topic in there. Yeah. Big Baby Davey, edit that out.
Now leave it in, David. Now leave it in. Get that shout out.
I thought it was going to be a roller coaster ride, but I thought it went really well. And post-interview, Buck sent me a text, and that made my day. That Buck said, "You were the perfect moderator of a debate. You let us go when we needed to go, but you kind of reined us in when we needed to be reined in." And trust me, guys, when Buck was saying for the 4th time, "What was that meal you made again, Dion? Was it pork chop and baked beans?" I just let him go. Let him go. Yeah. Talking about pork chops.
How was Buck getting set up? You know, we get all these players on here, and Lance Lynn didn't have a smartphone or really internet. I would guess if Buck said, "Yeah, I'm good. I know exactly what Zoom is." Buck was
married to a princess by the name of Angela Showalter, who sets up his iPad for him.
Yes.
Maneuvers everything for him, and then about 3 times says, "I'm leaving the room. Are you okay right now?" No, Buck's gotten really, really adept at it, really comfortable with it, and you guys hinted at it before. He is such a baseball genius that when he's in the studio with us and the things that he sees, I revel in having the opportunity to watch a baseball game with him. When I was covering him, guys, I begged him to let me watch a game with him. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to anger the opposition. And then one year he finally agreed. They had finished playing the A's for the year. And Buck doesn't like Tony La Russa. And he clearly didn't mind. Said, "Why don't we do that, whatever game it was, that game against the A's? I'll do that game with you." So we did a game, and I got to sit down and good old video cassette recorder, watch a game with him on a VCR. And the things that he watched and saw in that game, I wrote the story in the Times. It's out there somewhere. And I learned so much that day and continue to learn a lot from him.
Kirkchin just wrote another one, kind of the same thing. So it's all coming back. He's getting a lot of love. Jake, did you see some of the Buck analytics in the Kirkchin article? He said there's never been a great player with freckles. And that if a guy's feet point out to 10-2, he's not fast. You want guys that are their feet point in. Those are the speedsters.
North
and it was
south.
like just like, you know, little things like that.
High butt, you have a high butt on your body or a low butt. The high butt guys are the faster runners. And yeah, he sees things. Guys, one day in Lorenz's office, we're getting ready for the game to watch the game. And you finish the pregame. That's sort of like you finished your workout, you know, and you're getting ready for the next workout. Bob and I are ordering food. And Yes was showing, I think, Dan Cunningham and the grounds crew, they were just watering the field for the final time. Buck went on this dissertation about the various heights of the grass in different ballparks, which grounds crew does what they're trying to do to help their team and how that can help you or not help you. And I mean, it was a PhD class in the grass and manicuring of a baseball field. And I'm telling you, 29 other managers, well, 30 now because Buck doesn't have a job, 30 other managers were not watching that closely. They're just not.
It's crazy.
That's awesome.
He's awesome. I wanted to jump back to kind of the Dynasty years, and there's a player that came in that really kind of wrinkled the fabric of the team a little bit, and I think it would be an interesting segment of the Dynasty and Chad Curtis, because he really didn't get along with Jeter. I mean, the way it's told is Jeter basically said, "Get this guy out of here." We were watching back the 97 World Series, or 2000. Chad Curtis hits the home run, and the sideline reporter goes to do the interview. What was his name? Jim Gray goes to do the interview and asks Chad Curtis, "What does it feel like to hit that home run?" And he says, "We're not talking to you because of what you did to Pete Rose." Did Chad Curtis come into that team and really ruffle a lot of feathers, just Jeter's feathers. And it turns out that Chad Curtis goes on to be, I can think confidently we can say, not a good guy, dark path the rest of his life. But at the time, at least the way I've read it, that put a kink into kind of the cohesive fabric brotherhood of that team.
Well, to get him for an interview right now would be difficult, You do know he's in federal prison.
Yeah, you have to pay by the hour.
So that would not be an easy interview to acquire. Chad Curtis was a type A personality. He was very hyper, and he was a guy who, I'm not saying I got to know him very well, but I know from talking to other reporters that Chad was also a player who would preach to certain members of the media about you should follow my religious path. So I know that happened. I wrote an article about Jeter and Chad Curtis, which I wish I had it in front of me right now, and which Jeter, who normally shied away from saying anything negative about a player, basically went after Curtis a little bit. And it was after, I think Frankie Rodriguez of the Mariners, I forget all the specifics, hit somebody on the Yankees, and there was everybody emptied, and Jeter and A-Rod were talking off to the side, and were sort of caught on camera, maybe laughing a little bit. And the way Jeter described it was he and A-Rod said, well, next time this happens, I got you, you got me. And that generated a little bit of a chuckle. And Curtis, as Jeter was walking off the field, Curtis confronted him. We all saw this. And Curtis said, that's not the way to act. And Jeter, he's not going to want to have a confrontation on the field. So I think that created a forever fissure between those two players. Not that they were ever close to begin with, but Chad Curtis went after the most popular guy on the team, and a guy who, as we talked about,
popular guy in the country for baseball at that time.
Lived his baseball life in a certain way, and here's Chad Curtis telling him how to act, and that did not go well in Jeter's world, and Jeter was not happy with that.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me because that's the only time you hear about Jeter going off on another player or publicly saying like, get that guy out of here, or no, I don't like him. So it's always a wrinkle to me.
We're talking. I'm trying to see if I can find this article because he basically said something like, I have nothing to say to that guy, which for Jeter is saying a lot, as you guys just pointed out.
Yeah. It's crazy. And then the Pete Rose thing was wild. We were like, whoa, I don't remember that happening and all that. But apparently it was, I always wonder because you hear about that Curtis, like, was that really a Yankees group decision or was Chad just acting on his own to not talk to Gray?
Torre criticized or admonished Curtis after that and said, you don't speak for all of us.
Yeah, that's what it felt like, Yeah.
All right, here you go. On the spot. I found it. 8 days have passed since Chad Curtis criticized Derek Jeter for what he considered inappropriate behavior during a nasty brawl between the Yankees and Seattle Mariners. After tense talks that night and another discussion that included an apology from Curtis, the Yankees stressed that the disagreement was history. But apparently there is still a chill between the players. There's a quote from Jeter. I guess the best way to put it is, you asked me if I'm worried about something that Chad Curtis said. No, I'm not. Am I worried about it? No. I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, it's a situation where, hey, he didn't know what we were talking about. Unless you know what's going on, then you shouldn't approach someone in that manner. So,
yes, and that was, is that 1999?
August of 99, yeah.
He's traded that offseason.
Yes.
Yes,
I believe that sounds right, yeah.
It looks like to the Rangers for Brandon Knight and Sam Marsonek. How's your Yankees history on those two names?
Pretty sure. Actually, Sam Marsonek is an interesting name. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Sam Marsonek became a counselor. I'm pretty sure he has subsequently helped players. Maybe a substance abuse counselor.
He got one game in the bigs in 2004, so good for him.
Cuts. I wonder if he was in that book, Jim. Wasn't that the one-day baseball club?
Yeah, the Cup of Coffee Club. It's a good book. I don't think he was in it though, but it's a crazy book.
Jack, I want another name that was thrown in casually there, and another guy you talked to recently, Mr. Torre, Father Joe. How, in general, what's when you go back to those 90s teams, and I think it's funny that we have the managerial pictures that leak now where you see, it almost looks like the presidential pictures where they age and Girardi's got the grays and all that kind of stuff. And as we're rewatching these World Series, I mean, Joe Torre's brother had, what was it, a heart transplant or something like that? And there's so much going on.
He lost one brother, Rock,
right,
passed away during the season. His other brother, Frank, had heart transplant surgery right in the middle of the postseason, right around the World Series. So there was so much that happened with that 96 team on and off the field.
Right. So when you talk to Joe now, I mean, is it more honky-dory than he used to be? I mean, is it looking back and it's all memories at this point? Is he still kind of entrenched in it?
When I asked Joe about those 4 championship teams, he said, you asking me about this again gives me goosebumps. So I think that answers your question, that there's a level of pride as having been the man who presided over that legacy. He had great players, but he obviously had a good touch as a manager as well. And what always stood out for me was Joe Torre had a personality and a knack for just being a soothing influence on people. Doesn't mean he was a softie. Doesn't mean he wasn't a tough guy. It just meant that I had many players tell me that they almost felt as if they were letting down their favorite uncle or their grandfather if they didn't perform well for Joe Torre. And you said father, Joe. I remember writing an article for the Times, and I'm a pretty devout Catholic, and I go to church every Sunday, and I still wrote this. I wrote an article where I called him St. Joe, because I said this is just the way that everybody views this guy.
Yeah.
And his sister was a nun, so when I raised the St. Joe to him and told him what I was writing, he said, well, I'm not sure I'm really comfortable with you saying that, but I guess I kind of understand it a little bit. And Torre just had a way for getting the most out of his players. And when you talk to guys, and I've had endless discussions with Paul O'Neill, David Cohn, and others about this, he treated men like men. He treated players, and you hear this, well, he let us be baseball players. There's a lot to be said for that, guys. When you play 162 games in 180 plus days, you can't be a football coach. You can't be in guys' faces every day. You've got to let them steer themselves along until maybe there is a day where they need to be admonished. And maybe when they have their darkest hour is when you need to be their biggest supporter. And that's where I think Torre had the greatest knack. I've said this a few times, and you've heard my affinity for Showalter, and I loved covering Buck. Learned more about baseball covering Buck than anyone I've ever been associated with. If Buck manages that 96 team, I'm not sure what the result is. I can't definitively tell you that team absolutely wins in the way that it did, because I think some of Torre's soothing approach helped that team get to where it eventually got.
That doesn't seem like that was always Torre. There's that video that keeps going viral where he's biked up for A Long Road to October, the Braves documentary, and he sounds like a character from Deadwood. And, us 90s Yankees fans who grew up with Papa Joe, that is not the guy I remember. Even when he argued as a Yankee manager, it was very looking down, covering his, covering his mouth kind of, and just kind of like a disappointed scolding to the ump. Do you think that there was a drastic change when he came to the Yankees?
I think he matured, JOMBOY. I think you get a little older, you get a little wiser. But I did see him, and everybody always talks about the way he dealt with the media too. I did see him flash his anger at the media on a couple of occasions. There was one moment, I forget which player, all this stuff runs together. It might have even been David Cohn's aneurysm, but we were all gathered in his office and low for the days. And I'm saying pre-coronavirus. I don't want to say anything about, obviously, with the clubhouse situation, but it used to be great when you covered games and you actually went into a manager's office after the game and everything wasn't a press conference that everybody was going to be involved in, because I actually think you could get some more out of guys. But in his office, he went after a couple of reporters because the Yankees really weren't giving a ton of medical information about whatever the situation was. And I think it might have been Cohn's aneurysm. And man, Joe got angry, and that office got quiet real fast. So I do think he matured in the way that maybe you don't need to yell, but I still think that he had that in his DNA. The other thing Joe did that was so genius, and this I think is a maturity factor as well. A lot of managers used to be afraid that George Steinbrenner was going to call. Oh no, lost 5 games in a row. And in the 5th game, the team made 4 errors and looked sloppy. I'm going to sit by the phone and worry that Steinbrenner is going to call. Joe used to call George. Joe would beat George.
Wow.
And so that was so smart. Basically, I'm going to take my licking. I'm going to take my slap on the wrist here, and I'm going to make the owner happy because I'm going to recognize that we didn't play very well. And I think that helped Torre have such a smooth relationship with Steinbrenner because he kind of dictated the action. Yeah, George is going to be angry. I'm going to call him and I'm going to reassure him. We've got Cone, Pettit, and Wells pitching the next 3 games. We'll be fine.
It's a good approach. Yeah, he calmed it down. Yeah, Torre also, I was reading an article recently that, he never had team meetings, but he did before every post game. Every postseason game, he had a little team meeting and just say, hey, we're fine, guys. Go have fun, relax, and all that stuff. Funny story about Paul O'Neill is he canceled batting practice. When they were playing, it was 98, and they had so much pressure to win because they were the best team in baseball, crazy record, and they lost the first 2 games to the Indians, I believe, right? And so they fly to Cleveland, and Torre canceled batting practice, said, go explore, go to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, go do this, go do this. And Paul O'Neill's wife walked to the front of the plane and said, Joe, Paul needs to hit. I don't want to deal with him. So then Torre changed it to, okay, it's voluntary practice, and every single Yankee showed up. I thought that was a really funny story, especially
that's a cool story. I didn't know that Neville did that. That's a pretty funny story.
Yeah, I can't deal with him. He needs to go.
That's so good.
That was one of Torre's pet peeves, guys, by the way. He thought that players hit way too much. He used to talk about that a lot. He'd be sitting in the dugout, and that was another thing about Torre. A lot of managers would do their 15 minutes of media and then go on the field, carry a fungo bat around, talk to players. Joe would sit in that dugout for an hour talking to the media. And it was also a genius move because the more time he occupied the media, the less time they had the chance to get a guy who was struggling running off the field. And maybe that guy didn't feel like talking about being 1 for his last 17. So Joe had a lot of savvy ways that he utilized as a manager.
Yeah, and you had Girardi on, and you asked about the transition from being teammates with these guys and then replacing Torre, who was so notorious for dealing with superstars and older players. And Girardi had 1 manager of the year with the Marlins. I think their average age was probably 25. I know the starting staff was all 22-year-olds. And there's stories, Joe talked about it with you, that he kind of said, and I love Joe, but he kind of said, well, I was the one that had to bench these guys when they were getting older and sit them, which is true. But there's also a lot of reports that Girardi really struggled in 2008 because he came in with a little drill sergeant. There's a story, and it's that a story out there that he ran around the lunch table.
I think Ian O'Connor of ESPN had that story. You're right. The thing
yelling, "This is how you hustle," which, I mean, if you're Posada and Jeter, you were just cracking up at that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Posada too, but especially Jeter, who I never saw him loaf on a grounder. So, yeah, I thought he gave a good answer to that, and maybe there could have been a follow-up in there. That's the thing about these Zoom interviews. Sometimes you have people for 20 minutes, sometimes you have them for an hour. But, yeah, I think Joe had to adjust too. I think Joe had to find out what it was like to manage people that he had played alongside with. And then you look at Posada. I think he and Posada had a good relationship when they were teammates. And Joe used to always say wonderful things about Posada. But Posada also felt that Joe was blocking him to getting more playing time. Like, Posada would love to have been the starting catcher by 97 and not really have to wait and to have it all by himself until 2000. So that's not an easy transition. I've never had to
That's a hard
manage people.
Hard relationship for the two of them, right?
Yes.
Like from at the beginning and at the end, Joe was kind of the thorn in Posada's side, but from Girardi's point of view, he's like, he has nothing but good things to say because he was the older brother in that situation that just had to be a little whatever. But I can see Jorge, especially we know he's a fiery guy, being like, this guy again, he's taking playing time away from me again. So hard spot for Girardi, but
And if
he did pretty well with it.
If you look at Posada's numbers too, I'm just going to double check something here as we're talking. And obviously the Yankees won, and Girardi was a big part of it. I'm not in any way trying to say that Jorge should have, make Jorge the starter in 97 or whatever year it was. In 97, he only played 60 games. But if you look at 98 and 99, I mean, you give Jorge another 100 games or whatever like that. I mean, who knows? His Hall of Fame candidacy didn't last very long, but I mean, if he gets his home runs into the 300s, if he gets his hits closer to 2,000, I don't know. I'm sure if you're a player, when you're reviewing your career, you're very happy and content with what you've accomplished. But just like us in our walks of life, I wish I'd broken 20 more stories. I wish I had written my book with David Cohn was on the bestseller list for 3 weeks, not one. So I'm sure there are players who say, well, if this had changed or that had been different, I could have done this. So those thoughts probably swim around out there.
You know how to motivate me to make more dancing videos, Jack, and I think that brings us to the more important stuff. What are some of Jack Curry's keys for quarantining? I mean, are we having a weekly movie night? Are we stretching at 3 p.m. every day? Are we listening to an old album every day? What are some of your tricks to quarantine?
That's a great question, Jake. I appreciate you asking that. I'm a runner, so the running is a big deal for me. My wife, though, has thrown a little bit of a kink into that because she doesn't run, but she likes to walk. So sometimes my run becomes a power walk with her through the neighborhood. Wearing masks, by the way. I do have my mask on when I run. I don't care if it's 80 degrees. I still keep my mask on. I've also been very big on watching a lot of bands who are live streaming. I've probably watched 25 bands who are offering up streams of their music. Everybody from Dirty Heads to Ziggy Marley to Elvis Costello, Jesse Malin, Brian Fallon. Watched a band called Ballyhoo the other day that I've never heard of. I don't know if you guys know them. Reggae outfit from Maryland. They're actually pretty good. And diving into shows like everybody else. Had never watched Schitt's Creek before. Feel like an idiot that I was out of the loop on that. We blew through that. Watching Dead to Me right now. Just blew through season 1 of that, which is also terrific. And I crack up that you mentioned movie night, but we actually do usually watch a movie on Saturday. And I've been weak in picking the movies recently, so I think Pamela gets to choose this week.
All right. I mean, there's a lot to dive in there. I've watched a lot of those shows as well. Keep talking about it, but I'm watching Grant on History Channel, and now I'm getting a Ulysses S. Grant Buck Showalter comparison in my head. Just eye for detail and kind of like
you got to go there because Buck would probably love that.
Just like, Buck never played, but he then becomes this major great manager. Ulysses S. Grant was out of the military and becomes a great leader. So yeah, we'll have Buck on. I'll flatter him with that comparison.
Do that.
That's and I know Jimmy, you've been lost in the live bands because that's kind of your whole Instagram feed.
It's every night. It's like there's 5 options to go live. It's crazy.
Who have you watched? Anybody I should latch on to?
I dip a little more into like the alt country scene or folk. Like, so when John Prine passed away, I listened to John Prine forever, but Jason Isbell just put out his new album, which has gone, whenever he puts out an album, it goes top. I think it's number 1 right now. So I watch a lot of him going live. He's got some heavier songs on this one. He's got, I think you'd like the guitar in the song Overseas. It's kind of this, I don't know how to explain it, but it sounds like some old 70s band. And then it's I really like that song. So I do more Isbell, and that's where I'm stuck at. Brian Fallon, has he done live stuff?
He does on his Instagram. And what he's done is a couple of really cool. He gets another songwriter on, and they go back and forth and talk about a song and how they crafted a song. And then they'll each play a song. That's been pretty cool. He had the guy on from, I'm going to forget the guy's name, but the lead singer from Manchester Orchestra. And that was
I know Manchester Orchestra, but I don't know his name.
Yeah,
that's
Andy,
cool.
I think his name was Andy.
That's awesome. So Brian Fallon's great at.
If you're dipping your feet into alt country, do you know this guy Orville Peck?
Orville Peck. I don't. That doesn't ring a bell.
You got to.
Which is upsetting because I know the deep webs of that genre. But no, Orville Peck.
I would call him alt country, but He's got an unbelievable voice. And then I haven't done a deep dive into why he does this. Always has the cowboy hat on. And then pre-coronavirus, he wears a mask. You can't see him. All you see are his eyes. So he's always got this mask on. He was
very interesting.
I like that.
Orville.
It's like a mask of Zorro with a mop attached to the bottom.
Like it looks like drapes. Yeah, a mop.
Yeah.
Alt country Andy Pettit. I like that.
I'll check that out. Yeah.
And then my wife and I, the last thing I'll throw in there is because of our schedules, especially mine. I mean, it's crazy. We were the king and queen of takeout. We were not the biggest people who at home would cook. There's just two of us, no kids. Let's just get takeout. We are now on about day 87 of cooking. We have yet to get food from anywhere else. She has become suddenly she's morphed into Julia Child in year 28 of our marriage. So
how many meals have you voiced, let's not do this one again? And how many meals say, oh, this is amazing?
I'd say about a 90% success rate.
Wow.
There have been a couple of, she knows I'm more of a chicken dish, and she's tried a couple of chicken dishes that I'm like, all right, that one we could put that one to the side for now. But no, she's finally started to crack. Last night, I think she said there's a restaurant that we like locally that is open and is doing takeout, and you can do the old curbside pickup. So I think we might crack this weekend.
It's good. Whenever my mom was a little nervous, she tried a new recipe for dinner. She'd put it on the table. We'd sit down. She'd say, by the way, I don't like this, so I don't care what you think. And we're like, okay, pressure's off.
Yeah.
One bite, I'll take cereal.
Smart move.
Yeah. Got to get ahead of it.
That's good.
Cool.
How about you guys?
Hey, well,
what's kept you going during all this?
Man, I'm a lot of TV at night and series and shows. I'm doing something very bizarre. I'm rewatching an old show from the early 2000s that's like this campy family show. It's called Everwood. It was WB. I watched it with my mom when I was in middle school. And I swear the only reason I'm watching it because every time the new episode starts, I go, oh yeah, I remember this. And I love that feeling so much. So I've just been chasing it with every episode. They introduce a new character. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy was on the show. But I'm deep into it. I'm like on the 4th season, and there's only 4 seasons, so I have to finish it now. Other than that, music, and we record like all day.
That's good.
Yeah,
you guys are churning out. You've complimented our content, but you guys are obviously churning out the content as well, and it's good to see.
It's been a lot of fun.
We're fighting. That sports itch, I'll just always need to have that scratched, and that's where I don't know. You can only. It's like, oh wow, 2014 finals. Manu Ginobili was good, and that's why I mentioned date night and movie night because that is now being brought to me in a fair avenue because not everybody wants to rewatch old baseball, basketball, and Monday Night Football games. So yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. That's what I'm still figuring out outside of the work.
You got 28 years on you. Compromise. You got to
compromise. I meet in the middle.
Works if you compromise.
Yeah, Kate, my girlfriend Katie, she watched Schitt's Creek and she watched Dead to Me, and now she's moved on to Working Mom. So that's like I haven't seen every episode, but I just watch bits and pieces whenever I'm in there. And then I was really like in The Last Dance. Like that was very much my Sunday night.
I did
look forward to this.
I think we all did.
Yeah.
It was eye-opening. And I got a chance to, believe it or not, I was an NBA beat writer for 1 year. So I covered the Nets. So I was part of a couple of group interviews with Jordan. He had a game winner against the Nets, one game I covered. And then when he was trying to try out for the White Sox in '94, I got a chance to see him play. And just a handful of us, 3 or 4 New York writers, got him by his locker one day. I went back and read my article that I wrote about him trying out for the White Sox. Gene Lamont was not kind. He was their manager at the point, and we asked him if Jordan could succeed at Double-A, and Lamont basically said he didn't want to answer that. He wouldn't give a scouting report on him. He really was not kind to Jordan's baseball skills.
We turned his camp into a publicity. It's kind of like you can understand why, like, damn it, we got to deal with this. I didn't realize he had that hitting streak to start it off.
I didn't either. I I don't want to. The guy's the greatest basketball player of all time, and he without playing baseball in over a decade, he went and hit 200 at Double-A, knocked in 50 runs in however many games. I saw Terry Francona say with 1,500 at bats, he would have found his way into the major leagues. I'm not so sure about that.
I mean, Terry is a smart guy, and he understands you don't want to be on Jordan's bad side.
Yeah. Found his way into the major leagues, meaning what? He was a September call-up.
Yeah.
He did some pinch running because he did steal a lot of bases that year in Double-A. And I'm not trying to. I mean,
no.
God bless Michael Jordan that he even tried. That was one thing with Dion when we were talking with Dion about he and Bo Jackson. I mean, those guys did it. They actually were in two sports and had a level of success. Dion in football, a high level of success.
Yeah, and you don't see a ton of the 4th, 5th outfield 6'6" types, but that's maybe he breaks the mold on that.
No, his swing looked wrong.
That's the thing. I did an interview with Yankee and Malusis on WFAN, and I said his swing was it was very like robotic. They would say, well, okay, Michael, this is how you should swing. And it wasn't just the guy who got up there and fluidly. You watch him dribble a basketball, shoot a basketball, boom, that's Michael Jordan.
I had a friend, and he didn't play baseball growing up, but we were big wiffle ball backyard, big wiffle ball house. So like, we're 18, 20, and he got a bat and played wiffle ball, and it looked like Jordan, looked like he read a textbook on how to swing and then just rigidly put it into motion.
Walt Vriniak was the White Sox batting coach at that point, and he had a certain way that he wanted hitters to hit. But hey, Jordan had a year where he tried like heck to do something that is very, very hard to do. So props to him, and then he went back to doing what he was best at, as we all know.
Yeah. Is there anything else we need to tell the people for you, Jack? I mean, yes, we're here. Keep an eye out for some more of the interviews. You're formally inviting us to be a part of the 90s documentary, or anything else we missed?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that 90s show because they were going to start editing it soon, and I think people are really going to get a kick out of this. I told you we have a pending interview with number 2, so that should be good because he doesn't do a lot of these things, and I think that'll add to the documentary. People are getting a chance to see Jeter.
Open up with Chad Curtis.
No, I'm going to leave that one for you guys. Did an interview with Gooden the other day. That should be coming up soon, and that was fascinating to hear him talk about the peaks and the valleys of his life and his career. I have a quiz for you guys before we go.
Oh no!
Can you name the 11 Yankees who were on all 4 World Series teams, 96 to 2000? Can you name the 11?
Okay, Jeter, Bernie, Mo, Posada, Pettit, O'Neill, Tino. That's 7. Let's see. Starting
Luis Soho.
No.
Oh, that's the one I was about to say. I interviewed Soho the other day, and he didn't know that. Wow, you got the tough one. Good job, Jake.
We are Soho enthusiasts. We watched.
John just tried to know me on it.
I thought he missed one, but he was it was with Seattle in '95.
It's funny, guys.
They traded him away, and then they traded back for him. We detailed that in our
fragmented Yankee career, but he was there in '96 he was there for about 18 games, and then plays in 5 postseason games. In 2000, I think he played in about 10 postseason games. Good pull, awesome. Jake.
He's awesome.
Well, that still takes you to 8.
Yeah.
Girardi, no.
Who's God?
Brocious?
It's got to be. No,
I'm disappointed.
He's not 96.
There's one that you're forgetting that I'm really disappointed in.
Is it a pitcher?
It's got to be. I mean, did we do?
Coney.
Coney.
Wow. Coney.
Terrible.
Knobloch?
Nope.
It's got to be. Is someone like Mike Stanton? I don't know.
You're missing 2, and they're relievers. Mike Stanton is not one of them. You're missing 2.
Oh, reliever's going to be tough.
My brain jumped to Mendoza. It's not
Graham
Lloyd.
Mendoza. You're down to 1. And this guy, I'm going to throw you a layup. This guy,
Graham?
Softball. This guy has worked with Yes. He has been on the Yes Network.
Nelson?
Jeff Nelson.
Yep.
Damn. Okay.
It's crazy.
I'm happy with that.
So that's the 11 But yeah, we're doing that 90s show, so that's what I'm looking forward to. Gooden and Soho interviews coming out this week.
When do you think the end of that dynasty was? Do you think it was 2001 or 2003? Because
that's a good question.
Because in 2003 we were watching all the World Series, right? And we watched from 72 and on. So you see the teams. And one thing I said as soon as 2003 started, I said, this is a different team. You got Nick Johnson, you got Kareem Garcia in right field, you got Knobloch wasn't at second. It was
Soriano there?
Soriano, yep. It was just Boone was at third. Like, it was a much different team. So it kind of made me rethink, because I always said 2003. Like, if you want to say they got into 6 World Series in 8 years, is that what it is?
Yeah.
But really, that 2003 team the core of it was different.
Based on your explanation, and I would have said this anyway, I'm going 01. I just have always felt like that period is more emblematic of the guys we're talking about. 11 players played 96 to 2000. I'd have to see who else was on the 2001 team, but I kind of stop it after 2001. I mean, you could argue for 2003 because of what you just said, but I think once they lost in 01, I felt like something ended there.
It makes the number more cool. Is it 6 and 8 years? 96. There's no 97. There's
no 6. Yeah, you're right, because they lose in 01. That would have been 4 in a row.
Diamondbacks, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 6 and 8 years. 96, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2003.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a dynasty.
Yes. 100%.
That's insane.
100%.
That's crazy. All right, well, thank you very much for joining us, man. It's always fun to catch up.
Well, my full count cone book is coming out in paperback in July. That would be my other thing.
Okay.
Nice. I love paperback. I unless it's a book like full count, I usually wait full paperback, but I read that in hardcover just for you.
I appreciate that, John. Always good to catch up with you guys, and keep churning out your content. Hopefully we'll see you at a ballpark soon. I think we will. I think we're hopefully people will be at a ballpark soon, and we will be talking about it. Players will be at a ballpark soon, and we'll be talking about it.
Perfect.
Hopefully next time we talk, it's about who's the 30th man on the roster and some of the fun stuff.
I would absolutely love that, guys.
Perfect. Thanks again.
See you, man.
Well, Susan, in life, unfortunately, all good things come to an end.
And there you have it. Some good talk. I'm really excited for that Dynasty documentary to come out. All the raw interviews are up on YouTube, which is kind of a cool way to do it, because now you can see, like, if you listen to all these interviews that Jack's had with these players, and then you watch the documentary, you can see, oh yeah, you know where they got that from, and you can see, kind of the editing process of what they make out of all that. So that's exciting. And man, he's been around for all of that. So, he has all those stories, and he's seen all these players. So it's great insight. The media float at the parade just getting bombarded is pretty funny.
Man. Yeah, I was trying to make Jack feel better. Don't throw rocks at me if I ever end up on a parade float. I mean, coming into that, so the 96 one, you have no idea what you're getting into. You just know it's going to be a special day that you remember for the rest of your life. And then to at some point have rocks and stuff coming on ship, not a good time.
Yeah, you know what it was, though? It was just like John Heyman's personal enemies that they just knew where he was going to be.
Yeah, we found him.
It wasn't Yankee fans who found out it was media. It was just John Heyman had some people that he'd wronged, and he put all his colleagues at risk. So it was kind of rude of him.
I thought about making a joke of pretending to be Jack and saying, like, hey, John, why don't you duck down for a little bit? But I didn't know.
If you could hide, it'd be a lot better for everyone.
I didn't know if that hit or probably not hit. So
I made it. I dropped the John.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
It was good. Tweet at Jack. Tell him you love him.
Go check out the content that he's been putting out, and tune back in on Monday night. We will be recording the voicemail app, so give us a call, 908-845-5792. I say with confidence. Leave a voicemail. Nailed it. Awesome. Leave a voicemail. It'll be live on Tuesday. For Patreons, you can join us on Monday when we record. Enjoy your weekend. Have a good time. Go Yanks. Tell 'em, Grams.
Go Yankees.